What's up everyone, welcome back. Patrick here, moving on to the next video dealing with piecewise functions, another word problem here. This is a popular one that comes up pretty often. So what we have to do is write a piecewise function modeling a tiered tax system where income up to $50,000 is taxed at 25%, income between $50,000 and $150,000 is taxed at 40%, and then income over $150,000 is taxed at 50%. So as usual, before we get into the actual math, what I want to do is explain what all of this means. Now, what I'm going to do is represent all of this in a number line. I feel like it's nice to have a visual representation like this. So what's going to happen is income from 0 all the way to 50,000 is going to be taxed at 25%. Okay, then income from 50,000 to 150,000 gets taxed at 40%. And then let's extend this timeline. And then basically income above 150,000 to infinity is going to get taxed at 50%, like that. Right, so just a nice way to take the information and put it on a visual number line so you could organize your thinking a little bit. So what I'm going to do now is explain what would happen with incomes that are taxed in each of these intervals right here. And we're going to figure out the actual tax amounts manually. And then at the end, what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring back these examples that we're going through right now and then test them with our piecewise function that we get. And hopefully we end up getting the same tax amounts. So for example, let's say that you're making $40,000 a year. Well, the tax that you're going to pay on $40,000 a year is basically going to be 25% of $40,000. So 0.25 times 40,000, the tax you would pay is 10,000, like that. So that's one case over here. Now for this next interval here, so an income between 50,000 and 150, let's say you're making 120,000. Now here what happens is the entire 120,000 doesn't get taxed at this 40%. Okay? What happens is that the first 50,000 gets taxed at 25%. Okay, so the first 50,000 of that 120,000 income is going to get taxed in this first bracket at 25%. And then the excess income from 50,000 to 120 is going to get taxed in that new bracket at 40%. Right? So what is that? 70,000 is getting taxed at 40%, right? So the first 50,000 of the 120 got taxed at 25%, and then the next 70,000, so from 50 to 120, right? The difference between that is 70. That portion gets taxed at 40%, like that, and that's how you calculate the tax here. And so 25% of 50,000 is going to be what? 12,500, and then 40% of 70,000, that's going to be 28,000. And so you add those up and you get 40,500. Okay, so if your income is 120,000, the tax that you're going to pay is 40,500. And now the third scenario, so let's pick an income over 150,000. Let's say you're making 180,000, like this. Well, same thing is going to apply, only pieces of your income are going to be taxed at these rates. So the first 50,000 of your income is going to get taxed at 25%, like that. And then from 50 to 150, so that's 100,000. This next 100,000 from 50 to 150 is going to get taxed at 40%. So 100,000 of your income is getting taxed at 40%. And then the excess above 150 is getting taxed at 50%, right? And what's that excess from 150 to 180 to your income of 180? That's 30, right? So 30,000 of your income is going to get taxed at 50. right? So notice if you add these up, 30, 100, 50, you get your total income that we're working with of 180, right? And so if you add these up, you'll get what, 12,500 like we did last time. 40% of 100,000 is 40,000. And then 50% of 30,000 would give us 15,000, like that. Okay, so if we add these up, we'll get what? This would be 27,500 plus 40, so 67,500. That's the amount you're going to get taxed if you're making 180,000. All right, so write these numbers down here. I'm going to end up erasing them so we could actually make the function, because at the end what we're going to do is we're going to take these incomes and plug them into the different pieces of our piecewise function and see if we indeed get these same tax rates, tax amounts that we just calculated manually. So now let's get into making our actual function. So I'm going to introduce some variables here. So I'm going to let t equal the tax that is going to be paid. That's going to be our dependent variable. And then I'm going to let x equal the income. Okay, and that's going to be in dollars. So what we're going to do is we're going to plug in a certain x value, and then it's going to give us the tax on that income amount that we're going to plug in for x. All right, so because we had, so this is going to be t of x, right? Tax as a function of income. Now, because we had 3 different intervals, what's going to happen is we're going to have 3 different pieces for this piecewise function. So the first thing I want to actually label here in the piecewise function is our domains. So the first one, remember our income, when our income is between 0 and 50,000. Okay, that's going to be our first scenario right here. Our next scenario is going to be if our income is greater than 50,000, but less than or equal to 150,000, right? So if it's going to fall in between that, we're going to have a different function to calculate our tax paid. And then finally, we're going to have when our income is greater than 150,000 over here. Now, one thing I want to mention, notice how I set up these domains here. Here I put x is less than or equal to 50,000. So I included the 50,000 in this domain, which means that over here, I can't include the 50,000. It's just going to be when x is greater than 50,000, right? So like the 1 cent after 50,000, you're going to automatically fall in this bracket. You're going to fall in this domain right here. But all the way up until 50,000, you're going to be in this bracket over here. And then same thing here. So this domain, I included the 150,000, but then 1 cent after that. So if you make $150,000 and 1 cent, you're going to fall in this bracket right here. So it's going to be for incomes greater than 150,000, not including. I can't put less than or equal 150,000 and then greater than or equal to 150,000, because now we would have the function defined at multiple x values and it would no longer be a function, right? So we've talked about that before. So you could only have the meeting points defined on one of the domains. So let's go into making this first piece right here. So that's if your income is between 0 and 50,000, right? So that's going to be right here. Well, if your income's between 0 and 50,000, the whole thing is just going to get taxed at 25%. So that's going to be fairly easy, right? You're just going to take whatever income you make and multiply it by 0.25 if your income is between 50,000. So that's going to be the function for the first piece. Now, what about the next piece? So now if your income is between 50,000 and 150,000, so if your income is over here. So this one's going to be a little bit more tricky, but it's still not too bad. Well, if your income is going to be between 50 and 150, well, the first 50,000 is for sure going to get taxed at 25%, right? As we did with the manual example that we did at the beginning. But the question is, how do we represent generally now, right? Because now we got to represent it with an x, right? We're not going to actually have a number there like we had the 120 before. Now it could be any x value between 50 and 150. So how do we generalize this? Well, notice that the excess from 50 to x, so the difference there is going to get taxed at 40%. So what I could say is I could say the income over 50,000 is going to get taxed at 40%, like that, right? This here is going to represent the excess amount. So if you make, let's say, 70,000, if I plug in 70,000 here, 70,000 minus 50,000, we'll get 20,000 in this bracket. That excess amount, that's going to get taxed at 40, and then the first 50 is always getting taxed at 25, right? This is a constant here. That's happening all the time because we're dealing with the scenario where we're told our income is between 50 and 150. So this here is going to end up being the function. That's going to go here. But we don't input this. What's going to have to happen is we're going to have to actually simplify this, right? So 25% of 50,000, 12,500, and then we're going to distribute the 0.4 inside the bracket. 0.4 times 50,000, that would give us what, 20,000? Like that. And so, like terms, we would end up getting 0.4x minus 7,500, like that. 12,500 minus 20,000 gives us negative 7,500. And so the function that is going to go here is going to be 0.4x minus 7,500. And I mentioned this in a previous word problem when we were dealing with the phone bill question. This 7,500, you don't want to try to intuitively figure out what's going on with this simplified function, okay? Because it doesn't really make sense according to the scenario, right? There's no 7,500 floating around in the word problem. So when you look at this only, you might get confused. What you want to look at is this part, right? This is the intuitive part. This is just what that simplifies to. And that's what we input here. But you don't want to look at this and try to figure out the intuition or the logic behind that, because that 7,500, it doesn't really fit anywhere in the word problem. But if you look at this initial part, then it does make sense, right? The first 50,000 taxed at 25%, and then the excess over 50,000 is getting taxed at 40%. And then this is just what this initial expression simplifies to. And then finally, our third scenario, so if our income is going to be over 150,000, so that's going to be over here somewhere. Let's create a function. So if your income is going to be over 150,000, well, the first 50,000 is definitely getting taxed at 25%. And then the next 100,000, so from 50 to 150, is getting taxed at 40%. And then the excess amount right here is going to get taxed at 50%. And the excess amount over 150. So the way we would represent that, let's actually put it over here, running out of room a bit. You're going to get taxed at 50% for the excess over 150,000 right here. Right? Because we're making the equation here, the expression here, this piecewise, or this function piece, and we're told that in this case our income is definitely over 150,000, right? So that's why we know that there's going to be some kind of amount here that we're going to get in this bracket, some kind of positive amount, right? This expression is not going to work if our income is between 50 and 150, right? So if it was like 120, if we plug in 120 here, we're going to get a negative amount, okay? And that's not going to make sense. Right? So this expression is knowing our income is 150, right? It's explicitly told. And that's the expression that we're coming up with right here. And so basically what you got to do is simplify this, right? So I'm going to take this, let me move it up here. So we're going to get, with these first two brackets, 12,500 that we got before, 40% of 100,000. 40,000. And then you're going to have to distribute that 0.5 in the bracket. So you'd have 0.5x minus 75,000, like that. Right? And then over here, you would just collect the like terms and then simplify. So this would be what? 52,500 minus the 75,000. So you'd have 0.5x minus 22,500, like that. And so this simplified expression is going to end up going here. Okay, and again, don't try to figure out the intuition from this expression, right? You're going to get confused with the 22,500. It basically came from this. This is what this intuitive expression that we went through simplified to. These are just the simplified expressions that we input there. And that basically ends up being our piecewise function. And now what I want to do to finish off the video is test out those values that we had before, right? With these different scenarios. So remember, when we had an income of 40,000, what was the tax that we got? We got 10,000. So if these are going to be our X values, this is going to be our tax paid. So if we plug in 40,000, well, 40,000 is going to be in this domain, right? So we would plug it into this function right here, 0.25x. 0.25 times 40,000 does indeed give us that 10,000 that we got when we manually did it. Okay, what about the next one that we did? The next one we did was the 120,000. And if you remember the 120,000, it gave us a tax amount of 40,500. So let's see what happens when we plug in 120,000 into our piecewise function. Well, 120,000 is going to be in this domain. So we're going to plug in the 120,000 right here in this second piece. So 0.4 times 120,000, we're plugging it in for x, is going to give us 48,000 minus 7,500 does indeed give us that 40,500 that we got when we did it manually. And then our final example we did was the 180,000, and if you remember when we did it manually, the tax that we got was 67,500. So 180,000, notice that that's going to be in this domain, right? When x is greater than 150, so we would plug it in for this piece. So we plug it in for x, 0.5 times 180,000 gives us 90,000. 90,000 minus 22,500 does indeed give us that 67,500 right there, right? So when you're doing a question like this, I recommend maybe at the beginning, especially when you're getting used to it, take your time to do perhaps manual examples in each of these scenarios, get those manual tax amounts, and then at the end, once you have your simplified piecewise function, you can plug in those incomes that you use in the different domains and see if you get those same tax amounts like you did when you did it manually. All right, and that's a wrap for the question. So that's basically how a tier tax system works and how you can use a piecewise function to model it. And that's a wrap for the video. Hopefully you enjoyed that. If you want to see more videos like this, please go to my website, allthingsmathematics.com. Over there, all of the videos are organized by chapter, by section. If you feel like you need tutoring at any point, you could also hit me up. My contact details are on the website. Enjoy your day, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace out.